David here with Figboot on Pens, back again with another fountain pen review. Today I have for you a pen from my personal collection, which I recently picked up. The pen is from the Namiki Nippon art series and is called the Mount Fuji and Wave. What I'm going to do today is go over the parts and features of the pen, talk about the process in which it was created, what I care for and what I don't care for about it. I'll show some measurements, size comparisons, and provide a writing sample. Now, this review is going to be a bit longer than normal, but I feel that it is warranted with the amount of data that needs to be covered in regard to this pen and what goes into the creation. Pilot launched their Namiki line back in 1994. It's named after Pilot's founder, and that is Ryosuke Namiki. Previously, I had just one Namiki in my collection, the Incredible Emperor, which is right here. This is an amazing pen and very high up on the list of my favorite pens. Now, this pen has a vermilion urushi lacquer coating, but the majority of Namiki models focus on maki-e artwork. And I really didn't have any true maki-e pens in my collection. While I think Japanese maki-e art is beautiful and requires incredible talent and experience, much of the artwork on the pens that I had seen really just didn't speak to me personally until I saw this pen and I just had to have it. And I'll discuss what drew me to this pen here in a bit. Then I discovered the minimal amount that these pens are being produced and how it was challenging to find retailers who actually had it in stock. I was fortunate enough to find one who did. I actually purchased this from Cult Pens out of the UK. The pen arrives in this rather large softwood box. The lid lifts off. And inside, we have a couple of things. Sitting here in this quilted velvet bedding, there is a bottle of Namiki black ink. And then we have the pen. I was a bit surprised that there was no documentation at all. Now, that's not a problem. I just can't recall the last pen I purchased that arrived with no marketing or use and care guide or anything at all. And here is the pen. This is the Namiki Nippon art series Mount Fuji and Wave. There are several different pens in this series depicting images of traditional Japanese culture. Typically, I would show pictures of the other models, but with the artwork kind of wrapping completely around each pen, a single picture of each really doesn't do the pen justice. The pen is made from resin. The Nippon art series is essentially Namiki's entry-level maki-e line. They have many different levels of these pens, and some pens in their maki-e line have even sold at auction for over $200,000. So these pens are truly pieces of handmade art. It's my understanding Pilot does not carry inventory on their maki-e pens. These pens are made in very limited quantities and then distributed to retailers. While they retire certain designs and move others in and out of production, these are not considered to be limited editions. The first thing that surprised me about this pen after I received it was the size. While I wasn't expecting the pen the size of the Emperor, it was smaller than I thought it would be. I need to get better at doing my research into understanding the size of things prior to purchasing them. While this is more narrow than I typically prefer, in hindsight, even if I knew the size, I still would have picked up this pen. Let's do this. I'm going to start by talking about the artwork on this pen, which is the most important part in my opinion, and after that, I'll get to the parts and features section of the review. The main feature of the art is Mount Fuji and a crashing wave. Typically, Mount Fuji is depicted with a snow-capped peak. I like to think this orange-red depiction is because of the sun setting, kind of giving the mountain that glow. Then there are several birds depicted around the waves and continuing up onto the cap. I think that does a good job of bringing some elevation perspective into the artwork. What drew me to this pen is the similarity to one of my favorite pieces of Japanese art, which happens to be the most recognizable piece of Japanese art in the world, which is the Great Wave off Kanagawa. Here is the original version. It was created by a gentleman by the name of Husaki in around 1830. Now, technically, this isn't a painting. It's a woodblock print. The artist creates a sketch, which is then taken to a person who carves the sketch into a piece of wood. The original art is destroyed in the process. Then the wood is used to create the prints. When the wood block is new, the lines are more crisp and clean, which are the more desirable versions of this artwork. Over time, the wood wears down and the quality of the print diminishes. This was essentially mass-produced art for the time. It is thought about 5,000 copies were printed, but very few have survived the years. I could talk at length about this painting. There are prints of various qualities in a number of museums around the world. I have been fortunate enough to see 3 different versions, 2 intentionally and 1 by accident. I've seen one at the Art Institute of Chicago and one at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. But then I ran across one by accident. A few years back, I was fortunate enough to take the family on a trip to Paris, and we took a day trip out to Monet's house and gardens. If you are ever in the area, I would highly recommend a visit. It was incredibly beautiful. But as we were walking through the house, we were in the dining room, and sure enough, up on the wall was the Great Wave. I was just surprised to see a world-renowned piece of art in the dining room. But then again, it was Monet's house. Now, I actually own a version of this artwork myself. It's not in my dining room, it's actually in one of my bathrooms. No, it is not an original. The dead giveaway is Doctor Who's TARDIS flying around the wave. I know that's a lot of talk about a piece of art that isn't art which is depicted on this pen, but I felt that this art is inspired by that work, as well as others of the time period. You could tell a lot of similarities, especially in the waves. I just love how the crests almost look like fingers, making the waves come to life. The maki-e technique used in the making of this pen is called Hira maki-e. The urushi lacquered main design is sprinkled with gold and silver powders. Additional layers of lacquer are then applied. After the lacquer is hardened, then it is polished to a deep, lustrous shine. While Hira translates from Japanese to English to mean flat, the artwork on this pen is raised enough that you can feel it. Again, another element of this pen which really brings it to life, especially when you're using the pen and you can feel the raised urushi against your hand. At the bottom of the pen here, there is a signature of the artist who created the pen. The group of people who works on these pens is called the Kokakai. They are a group of maki-e artisans which was formed back in 1931. These are people who spend many years perfecting specific maki-e techniques. Typically, they concentrate on only one technique in their lifetime. The name was derived from a quote from the founder of the group who said, "In the way sumo is Japan's national sport, maki-e is the nation's light." And Kokakai means nation's light or treasure. On the Pilot Namiki site, they have a list of these artisans who create the maki-e pens for them, but you won't find this signature there. This mark is for the Kokakai itself, meaning that a group of artisans worked to complete this pen, rather than just being the work of a single artist. Okay, let's take a look at the parts and features of this pen. The top of the cap is rounded. Beneath that, there is a clip band, and then there is the traditional Pilot Namiki clip. It is tapered, and then stamped with Namiki and the company logo. On the end is a ball, which helps facilitate the use of the clip. It fits well in materials of varying sizes. The cap angles up and is straight for about the last inch. And then there is no traditional cap band on this pen. Having one would really break up the looks and interrupt the flow of the artwork. There is a medium-sized step down to the barrel, which is straight for about the first inch and a half, until it tapers down slightly to the end, and then the end of the barrel, like the top of the cap, is rounded. The cap twists off with a rotation and a half, and underneath there is a 14-karat number 5 Namiki nib. I've always liked the stamping on Namiki's nibs with the image of the iconic Mount Fuji. This nib on this pen is available in either fine or medium. On the side of most Pilot gold nibs they manufacture, there are these numbers. These signify the month in which the nib was manufactured. This particular nib was created in December of 2020. And here's a look at the plastic feed. While I feel the nib is size appropriate for this pen, I think having the next size larger nib would have been a little bit nice, which is the same size that is on like the custom 823. Pilot uses their own proprietary numbering system in regard to nib sizes. Their smallest nib is a number 3, and then there is this one here, the number 5, then it jumps up to a number 10, and then a 15, 20, 30, and the enormous one on the Emperor is a number 50. The section is rather narrow and not especially long. It begins with a very slight flare and then angles up until you reach the threads, which are not sharp or uncomfortable if your grip should rest on them. The pen is rather light. I would prefer a little bit more heft. While that can typically be accomplished by posting the pen, in the case of this pen, I would not recommend that. While the cap does post, and it does post securely, I don't feel comfortable having the cap rub up against the artwork on the pen. Over the years, that friction could potentially damage the artwork, which would be a bad thing. This is a cartridge converter pen. It accepts proprietary Pilot cartridges and a Con70 converter is provided. I mentioned this previously, but this pen and other similar ones in this line are basically entry-level maki-e pens. But that does not mean they come at an entry-level price. This particular model retails for around $560, which is significant, but in my opinion, very reasonable. You are receiving a pen with a 14 karat gold nib, and then the majority of the price is determined by the labor and artisanship required to create the maki-e artwork. So I feel the price is warranted. With some hobbies, you purchase something beautiful and then you just place it in a case or sit it on a shelf just to look at. It's something you don't touch and interact with. When it comes to fountain pens, especially ones like these, it is truly functional art. You actually get to use this art and feel it on a regular basis. Now, while I don't feel I will fall down the maki-e artwork rabbit hole, I really like the artwork on this particular pen. One of my only regrets about this pen is that I wish it were slightly larger. A Platinum 3776 is just a millimeter or so thicker than this pen, and I think that small increase would have been nice. But it's not such an issue that I regret picking this pen up at all. I think the artwork is beautiful, and as you will see here in the writing sample, the performance is outstanding. So now it is time for some measurements, size comparisons, and the aforementioned writing sample. So here we go with the size comparison for the Namiki Nippon art series. Just another look at this beautiful artwork on here. The birds, and then down below there's the wave just cresting. And I even like the smaller lines here at the bottom that really do a good job of just kind of adding some life and movement to the waves themselves. Now, in regard to some size comparisons, here it is with a Pilot vanishing point. This is the rod and water surface. And here it is with a Pelican M805. And then I mentioned it previously, it was fairly similar in size to the Platinum 3776. And this is the one in carnelian red. And then in regard to 3 other pens, here it is with an Esterbrook Esty, and that's the Maraschino. And then here it is with a Sailor, and that's the 1911 large in sea glass. And then here it is with a Montblanc 146. In regard to some uncapped comparisons, I've always threatened to do a Pilot comparison. And while I don't necessarily, let's put this here. While I'm not going to do a full Pilot comparison, I thought it would be interesting to show the different nib sizes. This was a number 5 nib, and then this is a number 3 nib. And then just as a comparison also, the number 5 nib is one that is used on the Custom Heritage 92. And then we have here a Pilot Custom 742, and this one has the number 10 nib. And then the next size up from that is a number 15, and that is what it looks like on a Pilot Custom 823. Now, I don't have a number 20, but what I do have is a number 30, and that is on the custom Urushi. That's the number 30. And then the mammoth one is the number 50 nib, which is on the Emperor. So that's all of the nibs other than the number 20. I guess I need to do some research to find out which of their pens has the number 20 nib, but that's basically almost the full gamut of Namiki and Pilot nib sizes. So here we go with the writing sample for the Namiki Nippon Art Series. And this is a medium 14 karat gold nib. And the ink that I'm using today, appropriately enough, is Namiki Blue. This is what the ink looks like. It's a nice solid blue. It's not overly saturated. It's something very similar to Lamy blue. And then here is a Visconti blue, which is a little bit deeper and more saturated than those two. Since it came with the pen, I actually wanted to show you the Namiki black as well. It's a decent deep black. Here it is with Visconti's black, and it's very similar in shade and tone to that. It isn't quite as deep as something like the Sailor Kiwaguru, which is probably my favorite black ink. And here we go with the rest of the writing sample. This 14 karat gold nib is outstanding. You can get a decent amount of line variation out of here. And the ink flow is fairly decent. In regard to reverse writing, I'd say it's rather sharp and not necessarily performs the best, but in regard to some fast writing, the feed keeps up just fine. So there we have the Namiki Nippon Art Series. I just wanted to give you one more look at this wave. I just think it's incredible. I love it. And while I said that I don't find myself, or I don't think I'll find myself jumping down the maki-e wormhole, that I do really enjoy this pen. And if there's other designs kind of on this, we'll say on this lower end scale of these maki-e pens, I'd seriously consider picking up another one of these pens in the future. Okay, until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.